Welcome back to Real Phonies, where we take a love for movies and television and combine it with very little knowledge about movies and television. I'm your host, Christian. Join me, my co-host, Joseph.
Yellow.
And Jehu.
Cacao!
It is Star Wars Day, so happy May the 4th.
May the 4th be with you, everybody. Even though this is going to come out on like May 5th or May 6th. Just pretend it's yesterday.
Revenge of the 5th and the 6th.
It works.
I mean, I still think Star Wars Day should be May 22nd, so maybe just don't listen to it till then.
Disney Plus wants you to think it's today because they released a crap ton of Star Wars content on it.
That's
which
correct.
We'll talk about a little bit of.
So yeah, we want to take, in honor of Star Wars Day and Disney's excitement about Star Wars Day, we wanted to take a look back at the Star Wars Clone Wars series, actually Star Wars The Clone Wars series, that has been going on, I think it's like 2008, that has a couple final seasons at this point, but this is supposed to be the final season, which I'm still giving like semi-air quotes. But the last episode dropped today, and so we just kind of wanted to talk about the series as a whole, where it came from, what exactly it is, and whether the final season's worth watching or what's great about it. Despite the fact that this series is all the way now in 2020, this all started in 2003 with a different series called Star Wars Clone Wars.
Now, this one is Star Wars Clone Wars. The first one was just Clone Wars, right?
No, this one's Star Wars The Clone Wars. The other one's Star Wars Clone Wars.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay.
2003, it's a 2D animated. It was a bunch of shorts, actually. It was made and released in the time in between Star Wars Episodes 2 and Episode 3, and it was supposed to be kind of like fun little vignette stories to bridge the gap. And I don't think it was intended to be nearly as successful or popular as it was, but it's got this really cool art style. Again, it's the same guy who does Samurai Jack, but it's a very cool, almost like Western-y kind of feel to a lot of the episodes. And it, besides just being an interesting, fun, animated Star Wars story to kind of fill that interesting gap in the timeline, it also introduced some interesting characters that we've carried on since then, including General Grievous, who's way cooler in that series than he is in anything else he's ever been in, and Asajj Ventress.
Yeah, this one,
cool show.
Wasn't it? I think it was almost intended to just basically be like toy commercials.
Yeah, no, absolutely it was.
It turned out to be really, really fucking cool toy commercials. Yeah, I love this. I love how little dialogue there is in it. It's mostly just cool imagery. I love that they were able to do, take Jedi powers to, like a batshit crazy level. Particularly in the Mace Windu episode. That Mace Windu episode is banana. For some reason now this one's not canon, and I don't really know why. That seems like something you might know, Jones. Why is this one not canon?
I just think when Disney took on the property, basically everything that didn't directly have George Lucas's name on it, they got rid of. I don't know for a fact that that's the case, but that's what it feels like.
Isn't there some female Jedi who dies like 4 times in various things?
There is.
Contradict each other? I think that might be part of it, but I'm not sure. But anyways, this is a great fucking show. I like the first volume more than I like the second volume. The second volume tries a little harder to tell a story, and I think that's not as much fun. But overall, it's all really good.
I will say, when I was leaving my job in Niceville, my last week there, I got stripped of like all of my responsibilities and ability to like work on anything. And so I just sat down and watched this whole series like straight through. And it's a little jarring that way because it's intended to be like 5 to 10 minute shorts or whatever it was. But it's still pretty spectacular.
I mean, I imagine watching particularly that first volume all in once is just like having Star Wars scream at you.
It really is.
This was followed up with the movie, though, correct?
Well after, yes. So this was 2003, which again was right before Episode 3 came out. But several years later, in 2008, Disney released a animated movie in kind of this 3D cel-drawn animation. Pretty clearly, I feel like, not that all Star Wars isn't for kids, but clearly marketed, I feel like, more towards children, called Star Wars The Clone Wars, where mostly the plot is Anakin Skywalker gets a Padawan named Ahsoka Tano, and I don't even remember what the mission is in that movie.
They've got to save a rival. No, actually, it's Jabba the Hutt's son, right? It's Jabba the Hutt's baby.
Oh, it is. Oh, God, that's so terrible.
And the baby farts a lot.
Yes.
This is the most farting ever in any Star Wars.
In any Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing that this property survived after this, because this movie is terrible.
Well, the show was already in production, right? And this was just 2 or 3 episodes that they thought they could stick together and make a movie out of.
That's the amazing. Like, you were absolutely correct. So this came out in August, and the actual series came out in October. So it's, the movie is just a hype machine for the show in just a couple months. But it is like, if you're going to pick just some random episodes or some random storyboards you might have had for the show because clearly, like, animation takes forever. Like, they clearly had ideas of what the other episodes were going to be like. It's hard for me to believe that this was like, this is our best foot forward,
I feel like the reason they probably picked this one, and my thing with this is the seasons of Clone Wars are a lot like the Harry Potter books. If you start watching the first season as a kid, or you start reading the first Harry Potter book as a little kid, they sort of, each one grows up with. So, I mean, I think that's probably what this was. This one was not for us. It was little kid bait.
And the biggest carryover into the Clone Wars series is the introduction of Anakin's Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, who anybody who hasn't seen the series or Rebels would not be aware of. But she's a great character that gets expanded on in a lot of other, in the Clone Wars and Rebels and in other media. But I think there are a lot of Star Wars fans who would consider themselves Star Wars fans who've never heard of Ahsoka Tano.
The thing is, with this movie, it seems like she's going to be annoying. She turns out to be a great character, but in this movie, I can remember specifically thinking, oh, this fucking bullshit, this is what we're going to have to deal with. We're going to have a shitty Robin for Jedis. But I was totally wrong about that. She's a great character.
George wanted to retcon Attack of the Clones. When Obi-Wan goes to visit Yoda and he's talking to the Padawans, there's a little Togruta girl in there. And George wanted to go in and CGI and make her face Ahsoka's face. And people were like, no, it's okay. Like, not every Togruta needs to be Ahsoka Tano. But
yeah, there's a lot of... that sounds like a George Lucas thing to do.
The
timeline doesn't add up.
I wouldn't have minded it. And yeah, the timeline doesn't add up, but whatever. I mean, if Greedo's going to shoot first, why not do that?
But I think that brings us to the actual Clone Wars series, which again has kind of well outlasted what I think it probably should have based on that initial movie from 2008. Again, with some starts and stops from then till now, with 7 seasons in total. And it's kind of it's an anthology series, sort of following the Jedi, sort of just following general heroes in that universe on, I guess, a non-serialized episodic basis that bridges that gap between episodes 2 and 3. So it's just a bunch of stories in that lore of the Clone Wars. Some of them intersect and some of them don't. Some of them are arcs and some of them are just one-offs.
I think this show really, kind of to Jehu's point, it progresses really well. And in season 3, which I think I've heard Dave Filoni talk, they intentionally made changes to Ahsoka to make her more relatable and even grow her up a little bit as a character. To season 3, man, it hits its stride, and I highly recommend this show if you consider yourself a Star Wars fan and you've never watched it. In my opinion, it's probably the best of Star Wars, even though there's some annoying episodes anything that R2 and 3PO are the leads in, you can probably skip, but you get introduced to great characters like Cad Bane, Asajj Ventress. You get follow-up on characters you never thought you were going to see again, like Darth Maul. And their stories are crafted so well. They're really, they fulfill that desire as fan service, but also tell a story that you didn't know you wanted to see.
I know this sounds crazy because obviously George Lucas invented Star Wars as much as anyone invents anything. But I really believe that Dave Filoni, who made both the movie and the series, just gets Star Wars better than George Lucas gets Star Wars.
Well, I would say that he maybe gets it better than anybody.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the other things that it's a series I think designed for kids, not necessarily kiddie kids, but somewhere in that, I don't know, maybe 8 to 12 range would be my guess. I don't know how old kids are.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I don't know how kids develop.
I don't really at all. But as Christian's saying, it kind of develops a lot of themes and mythology that you really like about Star Wars that like you've fleshed out in your imagination maybe or just wondered about that they bring to life. And one of the other things I think they do really good with this period is they introduce kind of personalities and like story arcs for the clones, and like the clones as a whole and kind of as specific individuals have their own arcs that are a lot about being like clones. And that's really interesting because it's something that's not really addressed ever in the movies.
And man, the voice actor who does that, I'm not sure of his name, but you know, I know voice actors doing multiple roles is not an uncommon thing, but he's doing an army that all has the same voice,
Right.
but he still finds a way to make them individual characters.
Right.
That's good shit.
It is
you
good
know?
shit.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I would want to talk about that Clone Wars does well before we move to the show is it's the best Anakin Skywalker.
For sure.
I was just getting to that too. Totally. Joseph just said things you imagine. This is the Anakin I always imagine.
Yeah, he's relatable. You understand how he can turn to the dark side, what the appeal is, but at the same time, you understand why Obi-Wan talks about him the way he does when they have this first conversation with Luke about him being this hero of the Clone Wars. Like he's just, Jay, you've compared him to John Wayne a lot. Like he just doesn't care. He's gonna get the job done, and he's gonna look cool while he does it. And this show is really the best version of Anakin.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, Hurt mentioning adding Ahsoka as kind of like a shitty Robin in the Clone Wars. Definitely, like, it does seem that way, but she and him and Obi-Wan provide just really great foils for each other and like their relationship to this idea of like the Jedi. And a lot of what the series, explores, which explores a lot of this lore, is kind of this dissociation from like goodness and like the lightness in the Force to necessarily the Jedi Council and its like processes and its ideals. And so a lot of what happens to Anakin and a lot of what that gets discussed over the series isn't necessarily like the light side versus the dark side. It's kind of just the Jedi versus, are the Jedi really as good as they say that they are? Are they really, looking out for the best for everybody?
Yeah, you hit it on the head, Joseph. It's the concept of Ahsoka is a great foil for Anakin because while she's the exact same as Anakin, but teeters a little bit more on the light, whereas Anakin maybe teeters a little bit more on the dark. They're both kind of hot shots that don't really necessarily agree with the tradition of the Jedi Council. And when she pulls too far one way, he pulls her the other. And she's a good foil so that you can see the two sides of Anakin.
For sure. It's particularly fun because I feel like it forces Anakin to toe the Jedi line more than he naturally would if he didn't have a Padawan.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. The other thing they do is they make Obi-Wan a three-dimensional character and give him depth in that he also has teetered that line. And while he maybe came out of that inner battle, it's why he can relate to Anakin in ways that maybe other members of the Jedi Council can't. They just see an arrogant kid, where Obi-Wan sees someone that he really relates to, and now we kind of understand why that is.
For sure. So if we haven't made it clear, even though I'm not going to say that every single episode of the Clone Wars is the best thing that you'll ever watch, I think the vast majority of them are pretty good to really good, and I think that its contributions to this lore and particularly this part of the universe, which I, as somebody who watched the movies, I felt like had a lot of potential and a lot of interesting things that didn't necessarily like pay off the way that I wanted them to. And so if you are even remotely interested in any of the things that we're talking about, if you have even remotely wanted to like Anakin more, learn a little bit more about this period in the Star Wars universe, I highly, highly recommend watching this show.
Yeah, totally. It's good Star Wars shit.
It is.
I think probably I'll still always go original trilogy is the best Star Wars thing, but this is the second best Star Wars thing.
All of that being such a popular show, and it was on Cartoon Network, got brought off, Disney bought it. They did one season of like unreleased episodes. that are pretty good. But because of that, the Cartoon Network one had a finite ending. And when they redid that 6th season of miscellaneous episodes, it kind of lost that closure.
Right.
So there's been a lot of demand for a 7th season, which brings us to what we now have, which is a final, quote unquote, I'm with you, I'm not entirely certain that's true, season of Clone Wars. Which is in 4 episode arcs, all leading up to the Siege of Mandalore. So before we get like in the nitty gritty, I'm assuming we're going to talk about the arcs in general. But do we want to talk about our feelings?
It's funny because I felt like this season represented how I feel about this whole series so well. Because like the first arc, I liked the concept and I liked a lot of the execution, but there were just certain elements that I felt were really kiddie and kind of threw me off from like getting fully immersed in it, but I still I had a good time. And then I feel like the second arc, I hated almost everything about it. And the characters drove me crazy and they're just real unlikable and dumb, and I was not on board with any of it. And then the third part of it was exceptional. It's so good. And I just feel like that's how the show is for me. You watch one episode and you're like, oh yeah, this is fun Star Wars stuff. And then it's like, ooh, is this good Star Wars stuff? And then the next episode is, ooh, this is great Star Wars stuff.
Well, I liked it all. I was going to bag on the second arc a little bit, but actually Jones said something just a few minutes ago that talked me into loving it. So when we get to that arc and talking about it, I'll explain what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm going to say all 12 episodes I like. I do agree that it's weird that the first 2 arcs, this being the final season, were almost candy coated. Like it felt like they could have done more with them. But
so apparently those were existing episodes that they never actually fully fleshed out. I think they just kind of tacked those in there, and really the last season, quote unquote, is just those last 4 episodes that they made specifically for this.
Yeah, I probably felt pretty similar to you guys. I really liked the first 4 episodes. The first arc I was really into, and that, Joseph, to what you just said, is a sequel to a season 3 storyline about Echo getting kidnapped that I don't think ever got released. I mean, the Echo getting kidnapped did, but the Bad Batch stuff never did. The first Ahsoka arc I did not love, but the more I've thought about it, the more I've come around to it, because I can see why it needs to exist. Whether I like it or not, I understand why it's there and why it needed to be there. Those last 4 episodes, that last arc is the best. It would have been the best Star Wars movie Disney has made.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know why they didn't release it as a movie.
I mean, they definitely kind of played it that way versus the other ones, which have, they have the kind of the episode of the week. There's like a quote, there's like an intro of recap, and they played the last 4 very cinematically, which I felt was just like, just jump in.
Yeah, and it played well for it. I really, really enjoyed those 4 episodes, and I would love, even if they released it as a movie now, even though I know what's going to happen, if they release those 4 episodes as like a 90-minute like movie experience, I would go and watch it. Obviously, I would probably put this as, I mean, maybe in my opinion, overall quality throughout the whole thing, I think is probably the second best season of Clone Wars, and it ends incredibly strong.
I mean, I think that's what's dragging it up higher than it might otherwise be, but that's fair.
It's just so hard to think that they came up with a second ending that is as good as the first.
Yeah, well,
totally.
I will say, to me, the ending for this reminded me a lot of the that Breaking Bad movie we got a little bit ago. In that the original ending for me is still like the ending. Like that's the one that hit me the hardest. That's the one that I remember. And this one, I loved it. I had a great time. It's more of all the things that I enjoyed about the series. If that hadn't, I mean, obviously it hadn't existed before this, and I was perfectly fine with it. But I think like you can still take it out, and that original ending still, holds up on its own.
Yeah. So we want to get into spoilers.
Yeah. So this is all spoilers. But anyway, the point is, watch Clone Wars.
Definitely watch Clone Wars
if you haven't watched it. But yeah, let's get into to the final season here, starting with the first arc, which I'll just call what do you want to call it? The Echo Rescue, the Bad Batch.
I think the Bad Batch.
All right, the Bad Batch. You want to go, Christian? You are much more immersed in this lore than I am.
Clone Trooper Echo is kidnapped at one point in the show. Rex, believing that he's alive on a mission, they find a secret signal or code that Rex believes is Echo giving intel to the Separatists. So he hires a ragtag group of oddball clones on a rescue mission where they go and save Echo. Introduced to the Bad Batch, which is kind of like what Jay was talking about. What an impressive voice acting performance from that guy.
Right.
Playing all these different characters that share, look, personality, and voice, and yet all making them feel different. It was super impressive. I really like these episodes. I like the clone episodes in general, and I thought these were, they're not the best, but I think they're really solid. I was a bit surprised that we did not get the answer to for Rex's chip in this episode or in these episodes. But I would give these probably a B plus. I was pretty into them.
I liked them too. Like the things that drive me crazy about the clone episodes are the clone naming, because again, I get that it's a kid's show, but the names of the Bad Batch people are Hunter because he's good at hunting things, Crosshairs because he's a sniper, Wrecker because he wrecks things, and Tech because he's good at tech.
Well, it is a kid's show.
I know.
See, I don't even think this is very kids. I think that the Bad Batch is 80s action movie. This is like if Predator happened in the middle of Star Wars, and I'm not talking Predator the creature. I'm talking Predator like the group of mercenaries out in the woods. I liked them. I think it's a shame that they showed up at the end because I'd like to see more of them.
Yeah, to your 80s action hero point, there's one that literally looks like John Rambo.
There's totally one that looks like John Rambo. Yeah.
But this was a good way to get back into it. And it saved a lot of the payoff. I think a lot of people went in this wanting to know what was going on with Ahsoka, and this was just a good story to help you kind of readjust back to that Clone Wars format.
Well, I also think
I liked it.
I think you needed a good clone arc for what was coming up for it to have the payoff. You needed to get back into. Here's what the clones are about. They're not just cookie cutters. They're people.
Yeah, and particularly this one focuses a lot on Rex, who's a recurring clone in this series, and a lot of it is kind of his emotions getting in the way of his. Or a lot of people assuming that his emotions are getting in the way of his tactical decisions because he just desperately wants to save his companion Echo that he had been with, he trained with, right? In like one of the first episodes.
Yep. Echo and him are from the same group. D. Bradley Baker, by the way, is the voice of the clones that just hit me while you were talking.
All right.
But it's as far as like the mechanics of the episode, it's a fairly straightforward like snatch and grab kind of thing from behind enemy lines. I will say the actual extraction of Echo from he's supposed to be hooked up to all these separatist machines that are using his brain to create battle plans based on what the clones think like. And the actual extraction is really frightening. I felt like if I was a kid, I feel like that imagery would really stick with me.
Yeah, how good is the animation in this season?
It's really good.
Cut above.
Yeah.
It's so good that it's like, why are we even still making live action?
Yeah, but I think that it probably settles it on that one. We can move on to the Ahsoka one. I'm curious to hear both Joseph's trashing of it and Jehu's reason for liking it. In this one, we have Ahsoka right after she leaves the Jedi Academy and journeys to the lower levels of Coruscant, where she meets some underbelly individuals and ends up going on a spice raid with them. That turns sour, and they become enemies to the Pike criminal empire. Joseph, do you want to trash this thing first so Jehu and I can build it back up?
For sure. I mean, look, it's not terrible. I don't mind this idea of Ahsoka's all by herself. She crash lands in this place that's kind of a rough and tumble joint. She meets new people who kind of soften to her because she's so soft to them, But also she learns kind of what the rest of the world sees, how the rest of the world sees the world and the Jedi and like daily life and morality and stuff. And I think all that's good. My problem is the people that she meets are fucking awful. I wish she had crash landed on any other platform. I hate both of the Martez sisters, one of which is like this naive mechanic girl who just doesn't know shit about shit, except for how to make a starship from scratch, apparently, but not fly it. And her older sister, who just seems really bad at making deals.
What were their names? What were their names?
Trace and Rafa.
Okay, Trace and Rafa. Here was the thing. I hated Trace kind of liked Rafa.
You would.
And I was trying to figure it out, and I figured out what it is. They're both, Han Solo types. and an essential component of a Han Solo type is cool hair. And Trace's hair is fucking awful. Whereas Rafa's hair is pretty cool.
Is that why you liked it, Jay?
No, that's not why I like the episode. Why I decided I liked the episode from what you were just saying is actually I think this was pretty essential to what is different about Ahsoka than Anakin. They both have a problem with the sort of, the bureaucracy of the Jedi, the sort of formalities of the Jedi, the sort of traditions they're trapped in. But the difference is, at the end of the whole thing, Anakin decides, well, the Jedi are bad, so the whole thing is bad. Whereas Ahsoka sees in this arc that, well, even though I don't agree with the Jedi, what the Jedi stand for and what the Jedi do, I do still believe in that. And that's why I don't not only think it's a good arc, but I think it was essential leading up to the next arc.
Yeah.
All right, you're turning me around. That's actually a very convincing point.
It's very necessary for Ahsoka and where she ends up at the end of the series.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very essential for Ahsoka for when we meet her, in Rebels, that you always kind of ask yourself if this person who is a Force user and a fairly strong Force user has existed in this universe, why would we have never seen her? Why is she not training a new Jedi Academy of people? And this episode arc kind of tells you why. In that, just like you said, J.U., she sees the advantage, but she sees the problems, and she doesn't really have the answer on how to fix either. And so she just does her part to try to make the world a better place while she can. And I think that's really, really important. I can't stand the two sisters. I
do feel like this whole arc could have been 2 episodes instead of 4.
Yeah. The other thing I think this arc tries to do, and again, I say it's necessary. I don't know if that's true or not, but one thing the Clone Wars does as a whole is kind of take things that are unpopular in the Star Wars movies and tries to give them like new life or new purpose.
For sure it does, yeah.
These 4 episodes try to be a rebuttal for Solo.
Absolutely.
It definitely ties in with Solo, probably more than any other Star Wars movie. And I liked that aspect of it since I like Solo.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's actually important. I think it helps establish Solo that it is a part of this universe, and that these things that occur in that movie, those machinations began during the Clone Wars and during this period. We see that Maul has a different plan, that he's not really banking on Mandalore, that he's setting up Crimson Dawn and his control over these drug runners. And I think that is important. Not that I think Solo is a bad movie. It's just that it can be forgotten and not included.
Right.
If you watch the show and you see those events, you're like, okay, well, now I want to watch Solo and see how that directly connects to all of these things.
Right. And instead of Solo, which I think to a lot of people, probably including myself to some degree, is, feels a little removed from a lot of like what's going on in the Star Wars universe, just feels like it's setting up, the stuff that we already know. This kind of contextualizes it and gives it like, here's a shadow layer of this universe that you hadn't seen that's happening at the same time as all this other stuff that you get to see on the surface, which I do think is good.
Well, and also, it seemed like the end of Solo was setting up for more that we'll probably never get.
Yeah.
But this sort of gerrymander turns it around to where it's not a setup for more, it's payoff from Clone Wars.
Yeah. So that leads us to the final arc.
Correct.
Clone Wars.
Which I love this because to me this felt like and I'm sure this was intentional, but like, you know, the whole series started with a movie. I feel like they just made an ending movie split up over 4 episodes with most of the same lead cast, really.
Yeah.
Well, the amazing thing about this final arc is how little Anakin and Obi-Wan were actually in it, but how much they were felt.
Sure.
Right.
Which I think is a kind of a reoccurring theme throughout the Clone Wars as a series. There are tons of episodes that Anakin and Obi-Wan aren't the leads in, but they are the central characters of this story, and all of their decisions matter and affect everybody else. So even that we could tell the story about the end of the Clone Wars and the rise of the Empire, and like 2 of the 5 main characters who have been the central characters of the show aren't in it at all. But you know, if you've watched Revenge of the Sith, you know exactly what Anakin and Obi-Wan are doing at every moment in these episodes.
Yeah, it lines up really well with it.
So one of the first things I like is that, again, even though the episodes aren't necessarily focused on Anakin and Obi-Wan, the first part of the first episode, we just get kind of our hero introductions to Obi-Wan and Anakin, you know, in the middle of a grand battle. And I don't know, that was really fun. It was fun to do that kind of intro again.
It was very good catching you up on this is what these guys have been like on this show.
Right, exactly.
What I thought about in that scene was, you guys remember when Anakin and Obi-Wan enter the throne room and Dooku comes out and Anakin's like, I'm twice as powerful as I was before, or whatever. I immediately, that was playing in my head, that Anakin just has got to this point where he's like, I can do whatever I want.
Right. Well, I mean, just right off the bat, when this episode starts, it lets you know it's not kidding around. The music is different. The intro is different. I'm not someone who usually always wants to go with dark Star Wars is the best Star Wars, because I kind of think if you think that, you don't really like Star Wars. But this is some really good dark Star Wars.
Agreed.
Yeah, it plays really well. Do I want to say a recap here? Or?
Yeah, we'll do a quick recap.
This episode picks up immediately following the previous arc, where a group of Mandalorians apparently had been spying on the Pikes, led by Bo-Katan, and they hire, quote unquote, I guess, convince Ahsoka that she should be their emissary to the Republic in helping free Mandalore from Darth Maul's rule. Unfortunately, the Republic cannot help, and so they send a squad of clone troopers under Ahsoka's charge to Mandalore, where they try to free the people from Maul's reign, all while the fall of the Republic is occurring on Coruscant.
Also, we get one last good, official goodbye from Anakin to Ahsoka, even though they don't really know it at the time. But you know,
right?
And it's a good goodbye, though.
It is, yeah.
Well, and it's like double sad because they don't really think that it is the goodbye. Also, I liked Obi-Wan's outro there. His little line about killing Darth Maul. That was a cool.
Yeah, it was good.
It was good. I have long said that my wish list for this show was that the last thing we'd see for Anakin and Obi-Wan is that they would rush off and save the Chancellor, and I got exactly that.
You got exactly what you wanted.
Yeah. These 4 episodes are fantastic.
They're so good. I would say the first one is mostly setup. I mean, it's mostly like payoff. Here are the characters you like. Here's all of the setup stuff we have to put in place for the next 3 episodes to happen, and the next 3 episodes just go.
Yeah, and it does you no favors. It is scene after scene after scene of just this buildup that we've waited a long time for, didn't know if we'd ever actually get resolution, or if we thought we were going to get resolution, it was going to come in the form of a comic book that nobody would read. And, just thank goodness for Dave Filoni or whoever that was like, no, we're going to stick to our guns and actually do this thing, because it really pays off. I do want to say one note of hesitation for it, which is if you've read E.K. Johnston's Ahsoka novel, this show craps all over it. It is an entirely different version of that story.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, it's totally different. Even down to the blue sabers, which is an interesting change in the show. But God, man, Whitworth's Maul is incredible. The fact that they brought Ray Park back to do motion capture for Maul's fight scenes, awesome. I mean, just everything about it is exactly how they should have done this show.
For sure, yeah. So the plot of the second episode is like the actual. Is it actually the Siege of Mandalore? Is that the official title? Yeah.
Siege.
So it's Ahsoka and some Mandalorians and the clone troopers fighting Darth Maul and his Maulorians that are other Mandalorians. It's a bunch of people in cool looking armor with cool looking guns shooting at each other all the time, which eventually.
Well, Joseph, you haven't watched Rebels, but that's Garth Saxon, who's the Mandalorian like warlord in charge of Mandalore after all of this.
Gotcha.
So all of that, although those are like kind of random Mandalorians, which is kind of weird, but who we haven't seen at all in Clone Wars, so they introduce in Rebels, they were like, oh, here's a little bit of an origin story for those guys.
Right.
Continuity, man. And all this ends up leading up to a big confrontation between Ahsoka and Darth Maul, where Darth Maul is trying to recruit her to fight with him to kill Darth Sidious, which she is like considering, it seems like, until he says that he's seen that Anakin's going to be Sidious's new apprentice, and she's like, no fucking way, brah. And then they fight.
And it's great because she's totally wrong.
She's totally wrong, but like, what a great fight scene!
Yeah, no, it's one of the best lightsaber fights. It's really fucking good.
Can we also talk about the fact the name of that episode is The Phantom Apprentice? How awesome is that?
That's a great name. I agree.
The third episode is.
I don't remember what the name of it is.
Shattered.
Shattered. Oh, you're right. Good job.
I only remembered it because it's a Stone song.
And I'll say the music is great in all of these episodes.
Yep.
Like everything is kind of based on the John Williams score. There's some liberties taken here and there. Most of the episodes of this show, kind of standard musical cues for this kind of TV show. But again, this is like a different level. It's super cinematic. I felt like I was watching fucking Blade Runner in this episode. It's just got like all these like atmospheric synths and shit. It's very ominous and unsettling, and I loved it.
Yeah, this episode is, they capture Maul, and they try to figure out what they're going to do with them. And the Republic, asks for him to be brought in, and we've already found out that Anakin and Obi-Wan were successful in rescuing the Chancellor, and we get a really great scene of the Jedi Council meeting with Ahsoka and discussing what to do with Maul, and that Mace Windu is about to go to his death immediately following this event. And,
that was probably my favorite thing about
Order 66,
but that's probably my favorite thing about all of it is it really plays well on knowing what's going to happen next.
For sure,
like,
yes. Yeah.
That's not always a great thing, but in this, it was what the tension was built completely around. Like, these guys think, oh man, we've just gotten through a tough spot and everything's fine, and that is not how it works out.
So yeah, as Christian was saying, this episode is really kind of about like where Ahsoka was for Order 66, where the clone troopers turn on all the Jedi. And
turns out she was in the worst position possible.
Absolutely. Which I don't know if Star Wars has done enough space horror shit, but spaceships are scary as hell, man.
Right.
I think this episode capitalizes on it pretty well and made me realize, well, they should do a little bit more space horror in Star Wars.
And then finally, the last episode is Ahsoka escaping and saving Captain Rex, because we know he makes it out and gets his inhibitor chip removed, and ends with, gosh, what a powerful 30 seconds there with Darth Vader finding her sabers. But the best part of that scene is it's a callback to the first episode of this arc with Ahsoka and Anakin standing in front of all of those clone troopers saying, they wanted to fight for you. And they all have the painted helmets on, and then now all of those helmets are on a stake. And there's Anakin as Darth Vader standing alone, holding his former Padawan's lightsaber. Like, gosh, that is circular storytelling for
Absolutely,
everyone who
man.
Doesn't know what it is. That is a perfect example.
That's what I'm saying, man. Like, Dave Filoni just fucking gets it, man, on like a level that I will never get,
Jehu, any thoughts?
Yeah, the last episode is great. The action sequence of them getting off the ship is original. I've not seen that particular action sequence in Star Wars before, where someone is outside of a spaceship trying to get in. And yeah, that final scene was great, and it was a bummer. Joseph said this is a, it started with a movie, it ends with a movie. That first movie was for kids, man. I don't know if this last movie was for kids, because that ending's a gut punch
for sure.
Yeah,
which is apparently how they like to end it.
And also, sure. I like that this show ended with Rex and Ahsoka together, because essentially both of their ways of life ended on the same day. So it was good storytelling to have those two people experience that together.
Yeah, it's not something I did not anticipate the show to go into the events of Revenge of the Sith, but I'm glad we did. It really does play really well and work really well. It's incredibly impressive, like you were talking about, Jehu. The way they build tension with you knowing what's going to happen can go wrong so easily, but yet it works so perfectly in this one circumstance.
Yeah, it was. When you know what's about to happen, and she's on that ship full of clones who she completely trusts with her life. We of course know from other things that she was going to survive, but if there hadn't been a Rebels, man, I would have been worried, oh shit, this is going to be the end of Ahsoka.
For sure.
Yeah. The only other thing that I really wanted to talk about that I thought was interesting, and because I'm a real, I'm a huge nerd for this, of course, but one of the things that I'm a nerd within a nerd about is the sabers. One of my big sticklers for Rise of Skywalker is the way Anakin's saber is treated, and one of my big sticklers for this arc is how Ahsoka's sabers are treated. Ahsoka ended Clone Wars with green sabers, and yet Anakin gives her back blue ones. There is some discussion on the internet, and Dave Filoni has talked about this, that was actually Anakin's, because the sabers were with Anakin, the crystals had turned blue, and it's supposed to be a form of his control over her. Like her inability to see that Maul is telling the truth about his turn to the dark side is because he has such an effect over Ahsoka Tano, which is why the sabers are blue now, which I think is pretty interesting. I don't know that it's exactly clear.
Yeah.
The other thing is that in the Ahsoka book, she buries her sabers, and she eventually she decides at one point she needs to build new lightsabers, and she's looking for kyber crystals, and she finds these ones, and her blades come out white. And it turns out that those are her original kyber crystals. They've just changed to represent who she is now. And I kind of prefer that more than her just building new sabers that turn out white, because that was really it plays really well in the book, even if it sounds kind of sentimental.
Right.
Obviously, that can't be the case now, as Darth Vader has one of her lightsabers. But it was one of the things that I was a little more resistant against accepting, because of how well I think that story was told in the Ahsoka novel.
So you guys have both said you think there'll probably be more of this, even though they said this is the final season. What are ways you think it might come back?
I definitely think a prequel is an option, that you could tell stories between the film where Anakin gets a Padawan and even the first season of Clone Wars. But also it's a non-chronological story to begin with.
Yeah.
So you could just do more one-off episode or arcs like you did with the 6th season, and that none of it, it doesn't have to line up exactly.
The thing I think they still have to do is there's a I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but there's a story called Son of Dathomir that is one of the, I talked about this earlier in the podcast, the oddball things that stayed in continuity. When Disney bought it out, it was pretty much just big things that stayed in continuity. The movies, the series, that sort of thing. But there was this one novel/comic adaptation called Son of Dathomir that was based on an unproduced Clone Wars story. And they reference it in the final arc. when Darth Maul says to the two Death Watch people, the thing about freeing them from Palpatine, that they were referencing that story. So and it's a cool story because it's just all bad guys versus bad guys. It's Darth Maul versus Grievous versus Count Dooku. So I think at some point they'll do that story.
Do you guys feel like, I feel like anyway, that this show is a lot of setup for what we'll see in The Mandalorian?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I finished this season thinking we're absolutely getting Ahsoka Tano and we're absolutely getting Bo-Katan in that show.
I would agree with that totally.
Do you have anything else?
I'm good.
All right.
I'm sure I'll think of more things, but
I'm sure. You can write it on your blog spot or something. Well, cool, guys. That's the last quote unquote season of Clone Wars. Again, if you've made it this far and you haven't watched the show, I mean, good on you. You must be starving for content. But really, if you haven't watched the show, or if you just don't remember, it really is just it's good Star Wars shit. It's a fun time. Thanks, Dave Filoni. I guess with that out of the way, what have you been watching, guys?
I will start. I didn't watch much this week. I continued Fairy Tail. It's pretty good still. I did watch the Sonic movie.
Oh boy.
And you know what? I'm going to say better than Transformers. It's fun. It's definitely a kid's movie. I'm still saying Detective Pikachu is the best
video game
adaptation. But this one is good. It's better than, you think it's going to be. It's very much like all of those other CGI live-action hybrid films, but just a little bit more nostalgic because you recognize some of the things. There are a clan of echidnas at the beginning of the movie. I'm sad there's no Knuckles. But for the most part, good time. I'd recommend it. Jim Carrey is old school Jim Carrey in it, which is a nice return to form. And Sonic is not annoying, but what's his butt? Who's in all of these movies? Cyclops. He's not great, but he's there. Yeah, James Marsden. F that guy. And because it is May 4th, I watched Rise of Skywalker again.
Oh, boy.
First time since theaters. I only watched it once in theaters. And look, I didn't hate it as much, but it's still the worst of those three. I feel like a lot of my problems are validated, but I would say this. I am a child of the prequel era. I still think original Star Wars is best Star Wars, but the Star Wars that I grew up with was the prequels. And things like the Clone Wars have made the prequels better. It is enhanced to those films, and I've really grown to love that generation of those stories. However, this movie really hates that generation of stories. And so there's going to be a disconnect for me with it on that. The movie is very much that Luke and Leia Skywalker are the main characters of Star Wars, and I just fundamentally disagree. I'm a diehard Anakin fan, and this movie doesn't really even hardly acknowledge Anakin Skywalker. So it's always gonna have an uphill battle with me. But that's it, I believe. Yeah.
That reminds me of one thing I was gonna ask during Clone Wars. Do you think with Clone Wars being as good as it is, do you need all the prequels now? Because I've already decided I don't need episode 2 anymore. Clone Wars is episode 2.
You motherfuckers.
Yeah, I could probably agree with that assumption. At least episode 2. It's a good companion for episode 3, and it really doesn't address episode 1 at all. But anything you get out of episode 2, you get out of Clone Wars, and it's better.
I can't argue with either of those points, but I will. Episode 2 is the hill I'm going to continue to die on. Because fuck you guys, it's not as bad as you make it out to be.
That's such a weird thing to take. That I always forget you've taken that stance. When your only thing is taking contrarian stances, that one's still so strange. I forget about it.
Well, very good. Hurt. What have you been watching?
For May the 4th today, I watched Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, which I call Star Wars because I'm old. And, I don't have much to say about it, except that movie's still fucking great. There's not really a lot to say about a movie that everybody's seen. But, I think it does a disservice sometimes to think of it as just a part of, this large thing. It's this really good thing just on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, I've been watching a show on Vice called Dark Side of the Ring. Has anybody been watching this at all?
No.
It's on its second season. It's basically the only reason I can think of that it's not a bigger deal is because it's on Vice and nobody watches Vice. But it's essentially, a documentary just like Everybody Loves Now, where you recount some sort of lurid thing from the past with a lot of twists and turns. It just happens to be set in the wrestling world. And I think wrestling's a great place to set that sort of thing. A lot of the episodes really revolve around too, like the era of kayfabe still being a thing. So there's this, additional thing on top of whatever sort of murder scandal that's going on, that also it's part of an industry that's trying to protect how its inner workings work. And it's I think it's even when it's, about murder and things like that, I think it's a fun show. The only episodes that I would say aren't fun are the 2 Benoit episodes. Those are just sad. It's just watching a bunch of people who were really close to a dude wondering what the fuck happened. But those are still really good episodes. But I'd highly recommend it. If I was going to recommend 2 episodes, I would say the Montreal Screwjob episode is really good. It's a really fun episode about a fun era of wrestling and about 2 wrestlers who just genuinely fucking hate each other. And the Slap Heard Around the World episode, which is an incident that probably everyone knows about, even if you've never watched wrestling, you've probably watched the clip of John Stossel getting the shit slapped out of him by a wrestler. This is which a lot of people misidentify as being Geraldo, but it's John Stossel, and it's a whole episode about that. And I think both those episodes are really fucking good. But that's all I got.
I also haven't been watching that much this week. I spent a lot of my weekend watching the Clone Wars because I hadn't been watching any of it. I finished Uncharted 2 on the PS4. It's a lot of fun. Those are fun games. It's Indiana Jones, but you murder so many people. I'm not saying...
I've also been playing Uncharted, and gosh, you do murder a ton.
I'm not saying that Indiana Jones didn't murder people, but I mean, I would be not even the greatest mass murderer in the world, but by several country miles.
Paul F. Tompkins once referred to Indiana Jones's job as archaeologist / murderer. So it's funny that this is a more murdery version.
It is. It is.
When I finished the first one, I finished with 80 headshots.
Yeah.
And that's still probably only a quarter of the amount of people I actually killed.
For sure. Yeah, the first one is particularly silly because it takes place all on one island. It's how many motherfuckers are on this island? But anyway, Uncharted 2 is fun. I still have Uncharted 3, which I've never played before, so that'll be up next. I watched the wife and I watched a Tom Segura comedy special, whatever his most recent one is. It was fine. There's a level of asshole comedian that I'm willing to tolerate, and Tom Segura is the edge of that.
I really liked his first record, but man, he gets on my nerves now.
Yeah, Bill Burr is right on the other side of that line for me, and Tom Segura is the end of my tolerance, and I generally think he's okay. Just I don't think it was his best special.
So wait, you think that Bill Burr is a bigger asshole than Tom Segura?
I do.
Hard disagree.
I'm with Jehu. I disagree. I can't stand Tom Segura.
I would totally enjoy hanging out with Bill Burr. I would not want to be caught in a room with Tom
I agree with that on hangout ability. But just as far as their actual routines, personal opinion, I don't know.
Right.
And then the wife and I, I'm restarting. The wife is starting Kill la Kill, the anime, which has been a weird experience for me. Because what were you gonna say?
I tried it. It's too far out there for me.
You've got
and I could not imagine watching it with my wife.
And that's the key. It requires a buy-in at some point, where you just you got to buy into it. It's a real ridiculous pervy show, and part of it that is part of the joke. A lot of the story revolves around this idea clothing is evil and nudity is good. And there's like it's a weirdly wholesome show with a spectacular amount of not technically nudity, but heavy emphasis on the technically. It's impossible to explain to somebody, and I think there's an episode, like 3 episodes in, where the premise of the episode is essentially just like, you just got to roll with it, man. Like, you're not going to have a good time if you don't roll with it. And that's to the main character as far as like all the nudity stuff, but it's really to the audience to be like, this is just what it's going to be. Buy in. And if you buy in, it's a great time. It's one of my very favorite shows, but my wife has not fully bought in yet, so I'm not sure how far we're going to get with it.
What was the name of this again?
Kill la Kill. I love it. It's so good, but it is hard to explain to people, especially if you're just watching it on mute. Actually, if you're watching it at any point and somebody looks at the screen. So, that's it.
Well, good. Let's get out of here.
Do we have any ideas for next week?
I'm sure we've talked about it, but nothing comes to mind.
Okay. Well, next week
I got nothing.
We'll be back with more slightly less quarantined content, but still from Zoom.
Right.
So thanks, everybody, for listening. If you have any thoughts on Star Wars, the Clone Wars, favorite episodes, favorite characters, we love talking about the Clone Wars, so please send it in. You can reach us at realphonies at gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter at realphonies, and on Instagram at real_phonies. Thanks to Zach Evans for art and Brian Velasquez for our theme. We'll see you guys later.
Later.